Hello, this is Father Len McMillan, and once again, this is a little video for our first communicants so that parents can teach them how the theology of the Eucharist using the Bible. So I'm still on the story of Abraham, but this is Abraham and Isaac. And there's a story that when Isaac is 33 years old, he's a grown man, Abraham takes Isaac and travels to Mount Moriah, and they're going to make a sacrifice. Now, Abraham says to the other men with him, "Stay here, and we will return in 3 days." So Abraham, he trusts both of them will return. And Isaac, he carries the wood for the sacrifice on his back up the mountain. And all these details are important. You can figure it out at the end. Isaac, when he's carrying it, says to his father, "Father, where's the lamb?" And Abraham replies, "God will provide." Then Isaac says a very important word. He says in Hebrew, "Here I am." That's the exact same phrase that Abraham used when God called Abraham to sacrifice everything and leave everything behind and follow God. I'm going to just mention this. Always throughout the Bible, when somebody's ready to sacrifice out of love, what they say is, "Here I am." It happens over and over. And Isaac trusts his father, but is willing to sacrifice. Now, this is interesting. This is the first time in the Bible the word love is used. And this is kind of important because love is connected with this sacrifice. But Isaac, it turns out when they get to the top of the mountain, God says to sacrifice this ram who has his head caught in the thorns of his tree. So the ram, the sheep, that's the fruit of that tree, the Lamb of God. And the place is called, quote unquote, where God will provide himself as the Lamb. And so there's this promise made to Abraham that one day God would send the Lamb of God, not a Lamb of God, but the Lamb of God that will free us and unite us in love and bring us to the promised land. And so Jews, when they worship, they blow this ram's horn. It's called a shofar. And so it's a call to prayer, but also it's a reminder to God when they blow it that, God, you promised to send us the Lamb of God one day. So what Jews are waiting for is the Lamb of God. Now, how this relates to the Eucharist is this story should remind you of Jesus. Jesus goes to the exact same spot that Isaac went. Jesus is 33 years old. Jesus carried the wood on his back for the sacrifice. Jesus trusts in the Father that he will live. Jesus offered himself as a sacrifice. It's Jesus who wears a crown of thorns. And if you remember, in the very beginning of the gospel, they're waiting for the Lamb of God. And John the Baptist points at Jesus and says, "Behold the Lamb of God." Well, the Lamb of God technically is a meal. That's what you eat, the Lamb of God. So when John the Baptist says, "Behold the Lamb," Jesus is the meal. Jesus is the one they waited thousands and thousands of years. So the Eucharist is the Lamb of God. Jews waited thousands and thousands of years to God to send the Lamb of God, and it's Christ. And Christ refers to himself as a Lamb of God. So the Eucharist is the Lamb of God that humanity waited for since the very beginning of religion. So that's how the Bible ends. That's how the Bible begins. Guess how the Bible ends. Once again, in heaven there's an altar, and in the center of the altar is the Lamb of God, and the Lamb of God is what gives life to all the saints and angels in heaven. And when John sees heaven, he hears somebody cry out, "Behold the Lamb of God." Well, that's kind of interesting because we say those very words in the Eucharist, that that's what humanity has been waiting for, and that's what we will receive, your kids will receive when they go to communion, but also that's how heaven operates. And remember, the Lamb of God unites us in love. That's why this is the first time in the Bible the word love is used. The Lamb of God unites us in love. The Lamb of God brings us home to heaven. And so in the Eucharist, we eat the Lamb of God that will bring us home. Unite us all to love each other as brothers and sisters. So parents, if you could explain how the Eucharist is the Lamb of God. The Lamb of God was first promised by Abraham. Christ is the Lamb of God, and your children in their first communion will share in the Lamb of God. So God bless. See you next week.